Hey Larry, how are you doing?
Doing good.
Roger is just wrapping up a call, so you might hear him talking a little bit. But yeah, we'll just wait another
Okay.
couple minutes and see who else joins.
All right.
Larry, I'm sharing a link in the Google chat for your review today, and just so you have access to it as well.
Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye. Yep.
Okay, cool. I didn't want to interrupt you if you're still mid call there. So, all right, great. How are you guys doing today? How's everything going? Roger, I'm taking it you're excited about the USA's hopeful catapult into the round of 16 here.
Well, I wish we had it under our belt already.
Yeah, that was a heartbreaker the other day. I was almost in disbelief. I was like, "This is crazy. We're beating Portugal," and then a bit of last minute heartbreak there. Larry, are you a soccer fan at all?
Not really. Sorry to say.
That's
In,
okay.
in these days.
Well, I only mention it because the U.S. is playing Germany at noon today, so we might try to wrap up a few minutes early. And if they win, they go through to the next round. Win or tie, they go through to the next round of little playoff structure that they have. So um, we might try to wrap up a few minutes early just to help facilitate that.
Sounds good.
All right, cool. Well, so for today, I wanted just to give, I like to kind of every once in a while give an opportunity for people to bring whatever topic they want. I kind of have one on backlog if nothing comes to mind for you guys, um, uh, or if you prefer, talking about some of the requirements stuff that I was hoping to get together as an artifact for the implementation guide. But yeah, that was kind of my vision for today, and certainly I can give some other updates around. Um, Resource map is the reference tool, some of the updates that we made, some implementation updates that are ongoing, and also some ideas we have around continuing to grow the community around people who might be interested in implementations as well as specific technical topics too, and how do we kind of onboard them and get them engaged. So. But yeah, maybe I'll open the floor for you guys to share. Hey, what are kind of the burning things on your mind, and how can this community best support you for that?
Well, I guess I don't have anything off the top of my head, unfortunately. So
Well, how's the sandbox coming along? What's kind of the status of that and some of the things that you're working on, Larry?
Well, the big thing we're working on now is the EMPI, getting that up with the new 3.0, the new version of it that does probabilistic matching, and trying to test against some of the data we have here to see how good the matching algorithm is and so forth. And we've been having issues here and there, so that's where we've been focusing a lot of our uh, resources right now.
Hmm. So that's for the master patient index, is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, the client registry, yes.
Yeah. So what it does is it goes through and it tries to find kind of duplicate values across the various, data points that you have per person. Is that kind of how it works, or?
Well, you have to set up this thing they call the entity, and that can be anything. Of course, we're using it for uh, people, but it can be dogs or machines or whatever. So you have to define the entity and what fields in the entity that are going to be used for the matching.
Hmm.
And then, of course, you have, these values, how close that has to match and so forth. So there's quite a bit of variability in the parameters you can put into it. And that's we're not really. I mean, we're uh, want to give it up, get it up, obviously, but we really want to understand it too because we don't want people to start using it and then the questions come up and then we have to go and figure it out ourselves. And so
Hmm.
we want to take our time and understand it through and through.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I don't know if you heard, but Odysseus has stepped down from being that leader in that group, and so we're in the interim trying to, carry on
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah,
as best we
I
can.
heard his role was going to be changing a little bit. So, um,
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
yeah. Well, it's still interesting stuff. I'm curious about it, partially because there's kind of a similar thing around master facility lists in the facility registry community and some of the stuff PEPFAR is doing that is related. We developed a tool to kind of help go through and do like a reconciliation of multiple facility lists where you can see like a mapping of duplicate records. And if you could imagine an ecosystem where you have 6 lists, none of them are standardized against each other. They all have different identifiers, and some of them you can cross-reference, and the data quality is also questionable. We helped work with PEPFAR to create a tool to like facilitate that, and we have some kind of things forthcoming to help. Hopefully, countries do kind of these facility reconciliations a bit more effectively, right? But certainly, like that kind of like algorithmic component where it's like making recommendations on, hey, I think these 5 records are the same, was always kind of like a second thing down the road we were interested in. But yeah, I'm always curious to see how different groups are approaching similar problems, but just in different spaces. So
Yeah, it appears to be very flexible, depending on, of course, the country and so forth. Not everyone has a street address, and some have tribes, and some have other things. And so, at this point, it appears very flexible to use whatever you have for the country to do your matching,
mhm.
if you want to include that item in the match.
Yeah. Well, cool. Larry, the other thing I wanted to ask you about too is I was kind of lurking on the health worker registry call yesterday around how to standardize code sets.
Yeah.
And that conversation was mostly focusing on services, but we've seen a big interest in how do you standardize administrative hierarchies in countries too. That's a big challenge, particularly in Tanzania. They're struggling with that. So um, I had to jump off early before the conversation really completed, but so you kind of collaborate on the terminology services community, is that right?
Yes. Well, I'm on the calls normally, and Jack Boy actually is the head of that.
Hmm.
And
What? Yeah, I had a question. I wanted to know if in the terminology service does it track changes that are made to code sets over time? Is there a way to review that in kind of the reference tool for the terminology service?
I know it tracks it now. Whether today you can go in and view that, I assume you could at some level, but whether it has to be an administrator or so forth, or whether
Hmm.
it's exposed for almost anyone who wants to see it,
Yeah.
I don't really know it that well.
Okay.
And do you know whether the terminology service supports hierarchies, or is it all just code value, code value?
It does support hierarchies. Jack set up one up for me at one point with hierarchies for an administrative division setup in the past already.
Yeah.
So, but does that end up in the OID or something? I mean, or is it an attribute that can be changed?
I, I don't know. I'm actually not too sure of like the inner workings of it. That's kind of why I was asking Larry some questions about how it works. I would actually love to play with the tool. If is there something hosted in the cloud or something I can download and install, Larry, to play with?
Well, of course, the sandbox has one, but yeah, there's the main uh, the site, the Apollon site. You mean like download just independently download it and try it yourself? Is that what you're?
Yeah, or get a demo somehow, somebody who knows how it works. Because I'm unclear. Maybe we could have that as a facility registry call coming up, actually. Because
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. I'm in the same boat as you. I really don't know how the whole the system works,
okay,
but I in general know what it needs to do and will be doing, but
yeah,
how it does that, I really don't know.
okay. So I guess my question though is it a stretch to store things like these code sets in the terminology service as it currently is? Because it's more designed towards Loink or SNOMED or whatever kind of medical code sets typically are used.
Well, my thought on it is that, well, I've always been pushing for the local codes to be in the terminology service. A few people think that only the major codes like Loink, SNOMED, and so forth should be in there, but I always say that even the local codes at the local level should be in there, so someone at the national level could go and find any code that's coming in from a certain center or facility, and they can go to this common place to find all the codes that are being translated and so forth.
Hmm.
So in that same thought, then facilities, there would be, well, you probably would know the best, but a way to define, is this a regional hub, or is this a isolated facility, or the way you would categorize facilities, and then those codes or terms would be in the terminology service.
Yeah, yeah. So then
What
like
about
multiple.
geographical hierarchies? Those are really important.
I agree. I think that's just as important as how we standardize services across tools too.
Yeah, and so then it becomes a question of whether the true OID, say, of the facility should be in the terminology service, or only its uh, you know codes, or what level in hierarchy it is, and that kind of thing. So that's really, I think, I'm not sure what the right answer is, and you guys probably know what you think should be the best. But to me, the terminology service vets every code of every conceivable item within the OpenHIE, and so
Hmm.
a facility should be validated against certain items, and in general, without those items should be in the terminology service.
Hmm.
Is the terminology service multilingual?
Well, I don't think it. You mean the well, as I understand it, there isn't a lot of outward-facing screens and so forth. It's more by calls through APIs.
No, I mean like translations of the terms.
Hmm.
Oh, you mean like what Loink description is, translated into other languages.
Yeah.
Yeah, like school in escuela or whatever. If a country wants to have systems using different languages but are coded in a standardized way, that
Well,
would be an important use case to flush out.
right, right. I'm fairly certain that LOINC is available in many different languages, although specific ones, of course.
Yes, but does the terminology service support multiple languages at the same time? So I may be accessing in English and someone else may be accessing in French.
Mm-hmm.
I think out of the box today, it wouldn't do that.
It
Uh,
would?
it wouldn't do that.
Okay, that's
But
sort of
I really
important.
don't know.
It might be a great way to kind of flush this out would be, like during one of our calls, what I would love to do is bring, our contacts in Tanzania who are like wanting this now, or wanting to start to resolve these things now, and have a little work session around seeing, hey, let's isolate the user stories for, hey, we need multiple languages, we need to track things over time, we want administrative hierarchies and all these things to be standardized. And then we could actually start to try to set it up and see, functionally, is this possible and where are the gaps and what would be, potential next steps to resolve those gaps. Larry, maybe during the next terminology service call, I could jump on and just ask,
Yeah,
the group if
that'd be
they would be
great.
interested in having
Yeah.
something like that, because we would find a lot of value there.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to put Jack Boy on the spot, but he's probably the one that we really need
Mm-hmm.
to answer all these questions. I know Andy is on the calls a lot, but I'm not sure how close he is with the terminology service and how it operates
Yeah.
and the limitations and so forth.
Yeah.
So we can invite him to one of our meetings.
Exactly. So
Can I share something?
yeah, go ahead, Roger.
So I want to share my desktop. Okay, and I want to go to here. So like this is a diagram from that document, and it's an updated version from the last one you've seen, that would show how I would expect us to maintain our terminology, um, you know, in in the terminology service, you know, rather than in our own whatever data store is holding the facility registry. Um, so that would be like where the facility types would be held, or you know, probably even questions like how many beds do you have in your obstetrics ward, or something like that. And you see at the top, I mean, it's not clear who should be maintaining, let alone where should be maintained the organizations and hierarchies,
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that we really do need to address at least some of this. Um, uh, I mean, they all end up being endpoints anyway, right? So we can implement them any place that supports the calls. So, but I would think that there would be a lot of advantages to be able to centrally access all the terms and not say, okay, well, we're going to get organizations and hierarchies from the health worker registry, and we're going to get service codes and value lists relating to facilities from the facility registry,
Mm-hmm.
and it's it seems like we're not really well knit together until we're really um, um, making use of each other.
Roger, I totally agree. I mean, I think the same way that ideally a facility registry acts as the source of truth to like learn where services are actually being provided, a terminology service is a registry of all those code sets. So everybody can look to a common source for, what are the different hierarchical data sets that I need to use, or code sets rather, or types of facility or types of services. I think those things are going to start replicating too. There's probably more that we're not thinking of, but these are the ones that are coming up specifically just between health worker registry and facility registry, and also the HMIS community right now. So, yeah, I mean, I want to try to advocate for the terminology service to be that source of truth for those code sets, because otherwise we'll kind of end up with a bit of a spaghetti mess where people don't know where to look for things, and I actually think that'll probably lead to the standardization of those code sets suffering quite a bit, and the actual interoperability probably suffering down the road too. So, I think you're spot on, Roger, on that, and let's definitely follow up. I imagine that there might even be like a bit of a workflow to like confirm, your code set matches correctly within the HIE itself or something. We might want to start to explore that too. That would be a great way to get the terminology service more routinely involved on some of these code set things.
Yeah, I think one of the hurdles we're going to have, or you're going to have, is getting the right name for the codes, or like the LOINC name, the name of the system, and how many of them would you have, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, we have a lot of that already. So I mean, Larry, this might just I might have spoke about this in the past at length, so cut me off if it's old news. But we really try to do like a requirements-driven process where a country determines how they need to code things, and then we look at that and we say, well, does this match an existing standard? And so, okay, well, if it does, then you could use a standard, but if it doesn't, then they have requirements that aren't met by existing standards. Specifically for like how they code facility type or something. Each country has like a slight variation on, is it a clinic? Is it a post? What is a post? What is a clinic? What is a hospital? All those kind of things. And so I think the process is in place for them to determine those things in a way that meets their needs, right? And then we start to figure out, well, what technological solutions are required to make sure that things can work together well and interoperate. So one thing I actually wanted to share, I forgot to mention this, was we have like a comparison of how things have been coded in other countries' facility registries around things like services and facility types and all that. And we would, of course, be happy to share that as like an artifact to contribute to this conversation too.
Yeah, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. So,
well, I think all I'm trying to get across is I'm in favor of all this. But in the beginning, I hate to talk against Jack, but he was against things like this and only wanted the high-level reference terminologies like LOINC and SOMED and so forth in there.
Yeah.
But to me, we get anything that is across the HIE needs to be, if it can be coded, it needs to be in the terminology service.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and maybe it doesn't fit right now in how the tool is, and that might be some of Jack's reservations, and I think we would just want to identify those gaps, and then we can start figuring out technological solutions to solve them, right? But isolating, hey, we have this kind of user story that people are asking for from the field. That's a really valuable place to start, in my opinion, and I think will help us make wise decisions on how to keep iterating our components and tools and interactions and stuff.
Yeah, and I know here in Indiana we have our concept dictionary, and we have almost everything in there, or well, not almost everything, but we have a great many things that are beyond, say, just lab terms and whatever. But so we use it as the clearinghouse for any codes that are coming into the system.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, it's right when you get it perfect, it changes, right? Oh, cool. All right. So, I think we have some next steps here, Larry. I'll check on when your guys' next terminology services meeting is, and I'll try to jump on that, and then we can see where it goes from there, and see if we can arrange something in our facility registry community too.
Let me maybe go forward in time here and see when the next one is.
Yeah. Roger, any burning issues from you? What's going on over at CDC?
Got one burning issue at the moment, actually.
Sure.
which is that I've been looking at fire.
Yes.
Okay. And it looks to me like um, we could, we don't have any protocols for any of the CRUD stuff, okay, on the back end, and maybe being more, um, how shall we, being more fire oriented on the back end would meet our need for CRUD and, also help us standardize and make it easy to use to reuse a lot of stuff. You know, the more I read about fire, the more impressed I am, and the more the opportunities for auto code generation and stuff like that, fly into view. So, in this particular picture, um, which is based purely on my current understanding of stuff, we do have location hierarchy and organizational hierarchy that get linked um, to each other. We have the ability to associate practitioners with locations. Um, we have ability to have observations in locations. I wanna. I think it's quite possible that we can have questionnaires um, as reference locations, um, or CDA documents reference locations. I want to look at that more because, um, you know, as you know, the issue of access control becomes sort of important, and I think it's much easier to organize access control if they're done in terms of by a questionnaire or by a data set or something like that, rather than get so granular down to the value um, and record level.
Hmm.
Um, so, at any rate, what this picture shows is the possibility of, I mean, this could show a health worker registry, a facility registry, and asset management,
Hmm.
okay, all implemented with um, uh, um, base fire objects.
Hmm.
Um, I
Yeah.
mean, we might.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
And of course they can be extended, So like if we want to distinguish between manages and supports, so we have two hierarchies hooked to a location, we can do that, okay? And it does allow us to identify sub-facilities, right?
Hmm.
Which is clearly an issue. Um, but we don't have to go all the way up to the top of we're not stuck to a geographic hierarchy. At any rate, it seems to me like that um, that as far as actually doing CRUD um, uh, on on our base objects, that this would be an excellent way to do that. Um,
Do you think I agree. I think I have only reviewed Fire really briefly. We talked about it a little bit at there was like a leads meeting in Indianapolis. I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago or something like that. Right when it came out, we were looking at it, and then it's kind of come up in small ways here and there ever since it came out. But I do like how they define location quite a bit. I mean, I think it resonates well with OHIE and how we have been promoting kind of the core components of our architecture. And there's probably like a number of kind of avenues to explore. Perhaps one is, is there functionality that Fire is supporting in how they kind of have things operating in a service-oriented way that OHIE is missing currently, and have countries been communicating this at all as an interest to support, right? So that would be something like architecturally to look at and functionally from like a service part. Also, I mean, you're talking a little bit about CRUD and how Fire operates in terms of how it's sharing data across the components. And I was wondering if do you see this as a thing that can inform the Fred API, or how do you see that kind of from an API perspective, Roger?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see it informing the Fred API, um, uh, both because I mean, what you see here is just the data model, because they also have like, but they have a sort of like they have a standard set of REST calls,
Mm-hmm.
both for doing CRUD and a standard mechanism for expressing searches. Um, um, which is really useful. One of the big deals I think about Fire is that while IHE is mostly SOAP oriented, Fire is REST oriented.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, um, which I think is like really really useful for a community developed project. You know, some
Mm-hmm.
of the coordination to do a soap object is like, you know, a little tough
Yeah,
for a voluntary association.
I mean, we felt that with CSD for sure. You know, is that there's some kind of tricky things going on in terms of how not tricky, but labor intensive or potentially complicating things around the standard that could have knock on effects down the road, right? Um, but but yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we should definitely explore Fire a little bit. Ed will be much more of a expert on this kind of stuff than I am when he gets back from paternity. But I think we should kind of find some time to at least consider it in how we look at the Fred API and how we look at the actual service as a tool and what it supports. Um, I think that's a great idea, Roger. Are there kind of things in the near term that OHIE should be looking at? You think, or what would you recommend?
I don't think I'm really right. I'm really ready for that yet. I'm still learning, but I think that it's definitely applicable. Um, let's see. Now I have to get back to the Hangout, and oh good, and I guess I have to unshare. Or have I? Are you seeing mine? Or are you seeing your baseline?
I see me.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there we
So
go.
you're
That's good.
seeing my, so I'm going to cancel my screen sharing. Okay, but here's a great link. Okay, it's a big presentation for uh, on Fire, and at, at any rate, I think that it's worth if people are unfamiliar with it, I think it'd be worth getting up to speed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but do want to hear. You know, it's 11:30 already. I do want to hear more about your your upgrade to resource map.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely,
uh,
absolutely.
could this is Larry? Before we leave the fire, I feel bad that I'm talking badly about some other members, but Derek, for example, is very adamant that we don't even talk about anything that hasn't been voted on and approved, and which fire, of course, is in that category. So in the beginning, we registry here and other places were talking about, well, given where we are today and where we might get this thing off the ground, maybe months or years away, fire would be right in the center, and maybe we should start looking at it today. But Derek was he's very opposed to looking at something that hasn't even gone through ballot yet.
Well, I guess the point is that we still have this issue of how we're going to do CRUD on our basic registries, okay? And no one's addressed that.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I agree with you that we should be looking at fire because it is gaining so much traction these days, and by the time we get around to all this, it's going to be here, and we're going to be uh, ahead with version 3, and it's not going to actually do everything we want. We're going to have to incorporate fire anyway. But I'm just trying to relate some of the other ideas that people are having, that it has to be a completed ballot or we shouldn't even be looking at it.
Well, I think if Derek were given a choice of um, of a draft spec versus roll your own, he'd choose draft spec.
Yeah, well, again, I'm really in the fire camp, but
Yeah, I would.
I'm just trying.
Yeah, no, Larry, I think your point is an important one for us to look at, but and or just like the whole community to consider. But like ultimately, from my perspective, I always wanted to start with what will help the users the most, and based on the requirements and things that we're hearing from them. And if we find standards that fit into what they need, that's good. But we're also going to be flexible in supporting users. So I think that's kind of like an important distinction we need to continue to flesh out, just like as a community on a whole, right? Because I think there's a bit of like a challenge that we'll all face there if we starting with standards, right, and then seeing where they plug in, but rather let's start with users and then see what standards might help them be more successful in their implementations. Yeah, I think that goes across technologies as well. If we say we're going to use this technology before we even look at what users want, we'll have the same challenge, and I think we need to always put countries and users first if at all possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and just to make sure we're thinking the same, is to me the facility registry and health worker registry, they're going to be one of the first entrants into all this, and then later the OpenHIE will be glued together with all the components. But the first responders, if you will, are going to be the facility registry and health worker registry, in my mind at least.
Yeah. Well,
And sometimes you support a user best not by starting with the details of what they want, but by generalizing and then customizing. Okay, and I think that Fire has done a pretty good job of generalizing. It will help. I mean, will help us do reuse and stuff like that for sure. Even if we end up with custom extensions for countries, as long as we keep working with the base and the methods, will be it will definitely speed a scale up.
mm-hmm. Well, I mean, let's for sure explore it and see how we can maybe incorporate things to do what we're already doing better, and also look down the road for, hey, what really does fire mean for facility registries and OHIE too, and then what we communicate out to actual implementers will be different than what we work on in a collaborative way here and in the architecture calls and stuff like that too. So I think it's something good to keep our eye on and see how we can learn from and incorporate perhaps very useful things into our community, and then also keeping in mind, hey, there is value in having standards approved, and that's of course important too. So any final thoughts on that, or should I give a couple updates on resource map and some implementation stuff?
Please.
Okay, cool. So we just released a new version of resource map. It was there's a couple. We kind of like resource map is a tool used by a lot of people, as is always an important spot for me to start. So we have like requests and people asking for new features routinely, or paying us to add additional things that they specifically want to see, and we try to make sure, hey, this aligns with the vision for the platform and what will be useful across users. So one of those things was support for additional languages, and particularly internationalization and localization. We had users who wanted to have resource map in French, and so we had yet to facilitate a process to do that. Instead, has a language translation service at this link here. It's called lang.instead.edu, and what essentially does is it pulls all the strings from any tool that Instead has, allows you to translate them into another language from the initial, And that had never been set up for Resource Map because it had never been a requirement from anyone. So what we did was we set that up, and another group called iTech is paying for a translator to go through and translate the strings. The actual functionality to achieve that has been deployed in the new version of Resource Map. And the really nice thing now is it makes it much easier if we want to support Spanish or, Roger, the other day you're talking about like Russian and things like that too. Is that we can achieve that much easier because the actual functionality to allow translators to come in and do new versions is there. So that was the one thing.
So
go ahead.
so what's its means? Does it? I mean, because I noticed that you had some codes actually in the when I looked at your code, I saw some text actually, built into print statements basically, where you built strings, message strings and stuff, that doesn't really work that well in a multilingual environment. So, I mean, so does this tool work by generating new source code that gives you a monolingual version in a different language, or does it does it, allow a dynamic change in languages while you're running?
It allows for a dynamic change as you're running. So right now you can, we only have 2 languages supported because those, we only had French translated yet. So right now it's French and English, and you can toggle between the two. And what it's doing is it's just swapping out the strings that are presented through the code of the tool. And then, in Resource Map, a user also can define their own metadata. So, typically when I've set up a collection or something, maybe you've seen a demo, I'm writing in English because I'm an English speaker. But this, a French speaker could have already, been using French language, including like a French keyboard with the right accents and stuff. But the base text strings in the tool, like where it says collections or create a new site or all that kind of stuff that's hard coded into the tool, can now be toggled between whatever languages we have translated.
That's that's sort of a problem with metadata-driven software. Is that you also need a way to translate the metadata as well as the program strings. Have you all addressed that yet?
So right now, what was addressed was the strings hard-coded in the tool, not being able to translate customized metadata from a user. So what it allows is for a user to choose a language, and they select the metadata they enter, and then if they're a French speaker, they match the tool to also be in French. But it doesn't necessarily dynamically translate their metadata they're adding, or allow for a multiple set of hey, I'm saying this is a school in English, and then I also have the French code stored here too. But that could be kind of like a next iteration of functionality to allow a user to use it as well. Roger, have you seen countries that would want something like that, or users?
Definitely. South Africa, I think, has a requirement of supporting 7 languages.
That's a lot right there.
And what's another issue happens, because most of us developers are English speakers, but when we're working in a country like Mozambique or something like that, where most people speak a different language, it's really important. You can't even test the program and reproduce their problems, because it's you can't read what it's saying, right?
Yep.
So it can be pretty important.
Yeah.
So I would say it's a pretty high up there, desirable feature in our world.
Yeah, we haven't. So I mean, we've only had some really really early conversations in South Africa. I'm not sure they might have decided to use DHS, from what I understand, as their facility registry there. I'm not totally clear. But certainly we want to capture that requirement and at like a general level for our community. And so I pasted this link earlier, but I'll do it again because it's related. Is this requirements comparison document?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just adding additional rows here based on what you're saying, Roger. So the one from iTech is row 83. If you take a look, and it's I want to see the base strings of the facility registry to be in multiple languages. And then what you're also describing is I want to set metadata in multiple languages too.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at the wrong version of it. I'm looking at the first link. I hear you typing. Oh, there it is.
I'm way down at the bottom. I'm adding new rows. So
No, I saw it. I saw the row. I thought when you were typing I would see it, but it didn't really come across until you
that's
hit
okay.
enter.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Cool.
Anyway, so what I guess this leads to the other thing I was going to bring up is this is a burning issue for me, and we'll try to wrap up quickly here. But one thing I want to do is keep documenting requirements as they come up, figure out where they came from. So, what country? You just mentioned South Africa, and they have this need. That's important to know. What tools actually support it? I think we'll find that some things aren't supported at all, and those are important gaps we need to figure out how to fill. And, are there API ramifications for it too? And so this is something that I'm going to be working on, and I would appreciate your guys' revision or kind of points on, or I don't know, pointers on missing requirements or knowledge that you have about specific tools that might be being used as a facility registry. Our goal is to have a reference tool that can support as much of this as possible, right? And then other people are going to choose to use tools based on their own requirements and what they need. And we want to help facilitate them make the best decisions they can based on what their requirements are. So I think the more we kind of fill in these types of details and make them easily shareable with others, it'll be super helpful for them. So anyway, so I think those two things are really important. And so I might take a stab at over the next week or so filling this in, because I want to include it in the implementation guide. But I would love for your guys' help on anything that I might be missing, as well as details on specific tools that I might not be aware of. So Roger, it's 11:47. I know you wanted to leave at 11:45. I'll give my last resource map update just so you can hear about that, and then we'll wrap up for today. So the other thing we did was we enhanced how a public user can interface with a facility registry in the reference tool. In the past, you could either turn on or off if something was public, if a set of data was public, is general, and if a country had something like contact details they didn't want to be public, they would revert to just making it private. Now what you can do is you can set public permissions per layer in a collection, and also by site. So you can allow the public to, you have better control over how a public or anonymous user, as we call it, interfaces with the facility registry tool, either by the API or the actual user interface itself. So that was the other request. That one came from Rwanda and has been implemented in the tool now too. So I think
that sounds really good. It's like I had thought frames were like a really good possibility to handle access control, especially if they could be nested, which I don't think they can at this point. I mean, that layers. But I can't wait to look at it and see how it works.
Yeah, I can give a demo during our next call real quick if that would be helpful, or feel free to play with it. It's already out on production. So.
Right, I think I'll go play with it. It sounds like fun.
Yeah, you might notice a few kind of optimization things going on today as we're finishing up our new push to production, though.
Okay.
But speaking of nested layers, it's something I've kind of hoped to see for a long time. We haven't gotten anyone to fund it yet, so it's a thing out there that we're interested in still. Anyways, guys, any closing thoughts so we can wrap up and go root for the USA? All right. Well, Larry, Roger, it was great to talk to you guys. And yeah, I'll look forward to following up later this week, and hope you have a great 4th of July and everything too.
Talk to you again soon.